This is the moment you've waited for.
What do you think? Well, what do you know?
Yeah, I love that little boy's reaction. Like, I just want to have a piece of gum or something. That's great. It's incredible. Well, hey, good morning. We're so glad that you're with us at Pathways. Since it's your first time with us, you're kind of coming in at the end of the movie. We're in a series called At the Movies. And if you missed any of the messages, you can go online at our website or download our mobile app, and you can watch those messages at your convenience. We're so glad that you're with us. And before we dive into this week's message, I just want to tell you about next weekend. Next weekend, we're launching a brand new series called Overcomer. And next weekend, this series is all about, let me tell you the big idea up front. The big idea is that you and I, we don't have to be a prisoner to some of the things that hold us captive, some of these unseen issues in our lives. You have them, I have them, but through Jesus Christ, we can be an overcomer and lead an overcoming life. And so I want you to join us next weekend. Come back and bring somebody along with you. So, The Incredibles. This weekend we're talking about The Incredibles. Also Incredibles 2, which I got to view with a lot of you on Friday night at Field of Scenes. It was a wonderful time, but my viewing experience was a little different than yours for two reasons. First, I had a preschool boy hitting on my 15-year-old daughter because he climbed up in the back of our vehicle and he was like, yeah, I kind of want to watch the movie with Grace. And his parents were like, yeah, you know, Braden, he's like a ladies' man. I said, I can see that. And so we snapped a photo, and I think Grace sent that to her special friend who's 16 and said, hey, you got a little competition here working. So it's kind of interesting. Now, here's the second reason why it was different for us as a family, because during the entire movie, I had every family member leaning over to me or jumping out and saying, Dad, you should use this in your sermon. Dad, you could talk about this. Dad, this is it. I'm like, will you just leave me alone? Let me just take in the movie. At one point, Laura wanted to check to see if I was asleep or if I was actually watching, and I was up for the entire thing. Enjoyed the movie. It's pretty cool. So anyways, this today is like a sermon from the Demetrician family. It's like a family sermon. So anyways, The Incredibles is about a family of superheroes who possess superpowers. And they aren't supposed to be using those superpowers because in the first movie, you know that they were part of a superhero relocation program. And it's eating Bob Parr, Mr. Incredible, it's eating him alive. He's cooped up in this concrete cubicle. He's working for an annoying boss at an insurance agency. And he would do anything to be Mr. Incredible again. Anything. He's fed up with it. Just like in that clip we just viewed together as he's driving home, he's in the grind, the mundane, it's monotonous, it's repeated. How many of you can relate to that? You know what it's like? Go to work day in and day out, and you just kind of do the same thing, and you wonder to yourself, man, there has to be more than this. Maybe there's a temporary moment of a child accelerating at something really good, or maybe you have a vacation planned, you look for something, you have a special date planned, or there's something really cool that you're going to purchase. But for most of us, if we're not careful, we can slip into this grind, this monotonous grind. And like Mr. Incredible, who's a superhero, in fact, the entire family has superpowers, and they would do anything to use those again. And when they do something other than using their superpowers to serve others, it's really frustrating. Now, in the same sense, listen to this. In the same sense, when we as Christians are given spiritual gifts, and to do anything other than use those spiritual gifts to serve others, it becomes highly frustrating to us, to you and me. I am convinced that if we would simply exercise our God-given gifts to our God-given potential, man, we would feel as though if we were incredible. Incredible, Mr. Incredible, Elastigirl, Violet, Dash, anybody a part of that family, we would feel like we were exercising some of the spiritual gifts that God gave us. And as families, it would transform our families. It would help our families to feel like we're more on mission rather than just chaos and mayhem, maintenance mode, running in all different directions. And here's the thing. There is nothing like using your gifts to serve someone else. There's no greater feeling than serving and using your gifts to lift their spirits. It's the greatest feeling in the world. The key to fulfillment in life is using the gifts that God has given you to serve others, to make their life better, to make their life a little bit easier, to shine the light and love of Jesus through your life, through the gifts that God has placed inside of you. We said this a couple of weeks ago, but it is so true that the value of your life is determined by how much of it you give away. The world wants us to think that we need to take and keep and accumulate and to make sure that we have more. And what God says is when you give your life away, your life actually, the value, the enjoyment of your life goes up. It increases. It is so true. You get engaged. You serve someone. You help them. Man, there's a contribution that you're making, but you know this if you've done this before. God actually just pours back into you in ways that you didn't even imagine. In ways that you walked away from that serving experience, that opportunity, think, man, God, you are so good. You're so faithful. And it just makes you want to give more and be a part of what God is doing in and through our world together. Now, here's the problem. When we fail to use our God-given gifts to the God-given potential, we lead quiet lives of desperation. And we as Christians, what we end up doing as Christ followers, and if you're not a Christ follower here today, then we're so glad that you're here. I want you to know that if you cross over and you take a step of faith and you reach out to God, when you make him the center of your life, what God does, he adopts you into his family. He calls you his son or daughter, and then he unleashes these gifts inside of you. I believe these gifts are from the beginning of time. God designates and he gives those out to each one of us. And when we turn to him, all of a sudden there's this heightened sense of awareness. There's this outpouring of his love. He just kind of activates those inside of us. And we use those for his glory. And I think if we choose not to use those, if we fail to use those, it's a problem. We try to blend in with everyone as Christians. We try to meet their approval ratings. We try to order our outside world based on what we want rather than what God wants. And we put on the shelf these spiritual gifts that God has given to us. We end up leading a Christian life where we're playing not to lose rather than playing to win. We're playing not to lose. Like, I'm just going to, I have Jesus. I know one day when I pass, I'm going to go to eternity. And we kind of turn toward, is my family okay? Is my work life? Is everything okay? And we play not to lose rather than saying, you know what, God, you have placed me in this time, in this location, at this workplace, in this season of my life, with this family of mine for a purpose to glorify you, and you have given me your life, your son Jesus Christ, and your spirit has energized me, and you've given me these gifts to make a difference. That's playing to win. That's being a family on mission, that every engagement, every opportunity, every sport, everything that you participate in, you're asking yourself, how can I use this for the glory of God? How can I make a difference? How can I serve? Do you know if you're a Christian today, your core identity is to be a servant of Christ? He was a servant. That's what he did. That's what Mark says. He said, I didn't come to be served. I came to serve and to give my life as a ransom for it. If you're doing anything else rather than serving, you're missing the mark of who Jesus Christ is. Jesus was a servant. It's all through Scripture. He was a servant. So here's what I want to do today. I want to show you the difference of between playing not to lose versus playing to win. It's in the Old Testament. It's a story. And if you have a Bible, a mobile device, paper copy, you can go to 1 Samuel chapter 14. In the Old Testament, here's what takes place with God's people. God chooses the nation of Israel to be his possession. And so what he says to them, hey, I want to rule you differently. I don't want you to be like the other nations. What I want to do, I want to be your king. I want to be your king. I want to be your dad. And they basically say to him, they end up saying, yeah, but God, please, 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 give us a king. Please, 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 give us a king. Please, 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 give us a king. Please, please, please. Have you ever had a child like that did that to you? Please, please, I just need this. I need this. I need this. Please, please, please. And you're like, you don't need this. Trust me, it would be better if you didn't have it. Please, 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 please. And then they say, well, I have allowance money. And you're thinking, oh, gee, what do I do now? It's their money. I gave it to them. And you're divided like, okay, if you want to buy it, go ahead and buy it. And then like 3 weeks later, they're like, I don't even like this thing. And they say, can I have my money back? And they're like, the Israelites are, please, 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 can we have a king? So God's like, okay, I'll give you a king. First king, nation of Israel, is Saul. He's first king. And early in his reign, he reigned for 40 years. Early in his reign, his first battle, we all have battles in life, right? His first battle was the Amorites. It was kind of a nation that he battled continuously. They were just trying to push against the nation of Israel. The second opponent that he dealt with early on in his tenure was with the Philistines. If you're familiar with the Old Testament, the Philistines come up like repeatedly. He was battling against the Philistines. And in 1 Samuel 13, the context to give to you today is that he recently had won a battle with the Philistines. But this second resurgence, he doesn't do anything. In fact, we'll read it in verse 2. This is what takes place in verse 2. It says this, Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree. See, what Saul was up to, he wasn't on the front lines fighting. He was on the sidelines. Where was he? He was under a pomegranate tree. I can see some of his soldiers just kind of like waving the palm branches, and he's splitting open a pomegranate, and he's just kind of taking it in. He's like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm not going to be on the front lines. I'm not going to lead by example. I'm just going to take a break. He's probably thinking to himself, you know what? We just won a battle, so why are we going to continue to fight to win? Why not just play it safe, and I'm going to play not to lose. I'm going to play not to lose. He's on the outskirts, just kind of hanging out there. And this wasn't an isolated incident. Do you remember another time when Saul said to David offered to fight Goliath? Remember that story? And when David came to Saul and said, hey, I want to step up and I want to fight Goliath, do you remember what Saul said to David? He said, you're just a boy. You're just a shepherd boy. There's no way. Where was Saul? Saul was on the sidelines every single day when Goliath came out to taunt him. And you know what's ironic about that? Saul was described, his physical description, he was a head and shoulder above every male in the nation of Israel. The irony is that the person who was ready and able to challenge Goliath was actually acting like a coward. He was on the sideline. A little shepherd boy had to step up. This was a pattern in Saul's life. He'd rather play not to lose versus playing to win. You know, there's no place for sideliners in a church. There's no place for people to sit on the sidelines at Pathways. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable to sit on the sidelines at Pathways. You should identify and use your spiritual gift to make sure that Pathways continues to form and to grow in the image of who Jesus Christ is as the head of the church. We should be working together, collectively, bringing our spiritual gifts together to make a difference. This isn't just about me. I have a role and a contribution to make. But it's not just about me. It's not about our staff. It's not about key leaders. It's about every single person. There's no room for sideliners in a church. Church isn't a spectator sport. It's not a solo sport. It's meant to be done together. And the very first simple way that you can get off the sidelines, really simple, is just to invite somebody to Pathways. Don't keep Pathways to yourself. Become an inviter. Just become an inviter. Rather than just attending, I'm telling you, here's what will change your experience. When you learn to invite somebody, I saw somebody just out in the lobby. I saw them inviting somebody, and they were waiting at the door looking for that person to come. And I thought their experience is totally different. It hit me. I was like, their experience is totally different because they're not coming in. They're not just going to check their kids in or find their seat. They're looking for someone else. A way to engage, a way to step off of the sidelines out into the field is simply to become an inviter. You know the second thing that you can do? You can get plugged into a ministry. You can simply get plugged into a ministry. A ministry is a serving team. And there's so many serving teams that you can be involved in here at Pathways. Whether it's in front lines with our guests or whether it's with our kids or our students or with small groups or with outreach, there are multiple opportunities for you to engage. But that responsibility rests with you, belongs to you. It's a privilege to get involved. You know, sometimes I hear as a pastor, you know, I don't get a lot out of church. And my response is typically this. The way that you get more out of church, is to give more. You know this. The way to get something out of your gym membership is to give time to that gym, isn't it? The way to get something out of your job is to give some more effort, some more time, some more focused energy. The way to get more out of church is to give more, to participate, to get energized around things, to be a kind of person who's not willing or waiting just to be spoon-fed, but actually is checking and looking and talking and engaging people. That's what church is about. Here's the bottom line. If you're looking for an excuse to stay on the sidelines, it's easy to do. We're all busy. We all have problems. We're all not qualified. But it's by God's grace that he lavishes on us these God-given gifts. And sometimes, if we're honest, we act like we're doing God a favor when we use those gifts. And worse yet, we ask God the question, do I have to? We view a privilege as an obligation. And that's sad. I wonder what God thinks about that. You know, as I was watching Incredibles 2, what really clicked with me is that they looked at this privilege of having these superpowers as a way to leverage it as an opportunity, to put superheroes back on the map. And I want to show you just a brief portion of the trailer to The Incredibles 2, because I think it's really fascinating how they leverage this opportunity to make a difference. Check this out. Yeah, so if you haven't seen Incredibles 2, this is a little bit of a spoiler, so make sure you plug your ears right now. Mom gets a new job, and Mom is putting the superheroes back on the map, and there are some problems. Like Mr. Incredible, he's learning some new skills when it comes to household and parenting, and they have new challenges, a new villain, a screen slaver. In fact, if you're a parent, you should check the movie out for that. It has some powerful messages about screens and things like that. And so just incredible when you think about this movie, because this movie right now speaks to us in some powerful ways. The Incredibles as a family begins to come together and to use all of their gifts rather than just Mr. Incredible, but all of their gifts to serve one another and to make a difference. Now, they had excuses, they had challenges, of course, that's life, but they chose to step off the sidelines and get into the action. And this is what happens in our story for today. Because while Saul's on the sidelines, Jonathan does something interesting. Jonathan is Saul's son. And Jonathan goes on a secret mission. Let's look at verse 3. It says this. No one was aware that Jonathan had left. He left the troops and he went on a secret mission. What was taking place here? Well, Jonathan was tired of sitting on the sideline. He wanted some action. He wanted to get in the game. He wanted to make sure that he was going to make a difference. And so this is what he does. Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, come, let's go over to the outpost of the uncircumcised men. Let's go to the Philistines. Let's go to their let's bring the fight to them. He wasn't playing not to lose. He was playing to win. He said, we're going to go. We're going to go up to them, and we're going to go see what takes place. And then this is what he says, perhaps, I love this, perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Perhaps. He wasn't even convinced that God was going to do something. He was just stepping out in faith. He was tired of sitting on the sidelines. He was tired of just being a part of the royal family. He was tired of feeling entitled. He was tired of watching the Philistines beat up on his people. And he said, you know what? Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Then he has a big faith statement. Nothing, go back one slide, nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether many or by few. He knew that God was a big God. His God was a big God. And he was ready. Next verse takes place. And the armor bearer says this, do all that you have in mind. Go ahead. I am with you, heart, and say that last word. Remember last weekend what Chris was talking about? Jonathan had a soul friend. He had an armor bearer who's breathing words of encouragement to him. The plan was kind of like silly. So we're going to go in broad daylight, Jonathan, and we're going to march to their outpost. In fact, if you look at the scripture, he goes through like a ravine, two cliffs on each side. And he marches right up in broad daylight. He even has a plan. The plan is such a ridiculous plan because he says to his armor bearer, if they call us up, we'll climb up. We'll know it's of God. If they say go away, then we'll know that's not of God and we'll just leave. Now, obviously, if you're the Philistines and you have any military strategy in your bone, you're going to understand if they're on low ground and they walk up to the outpost in broad daylight, you're going to say, yeah, come on, climb up. You want to pick a fight? Let's go. So what does Jonathan hear from his armor bearer? He doesn't hear these words. Are you crazy? Are you nuts? Like, dude, I'm not going to carry your sword. You're an idiot. He says, I'm with you. Heart and soul. Do you know why Jonathan had a soul friend? Because Jonathan was a soul friend. That's what he provided to David. He modeled that. When you model community and relationship, when we as a church, imagine our church, when we engage, when we serve, what we create a culture together where normal becomes we're in community, where normal becomes we serve together, where normal becomes people are just accepting Christ and taking steps forward, where it's normal where people are obedient and give and are generous and give above and beyond the tithe. It's normal becomes a passion, an all-consuming passion to make a difference in the world that God has placed us in. This is what takes place with Jonathan. There he is with his armor bearer and he's saying, let's do it. And so the Philistines say, hey, why don't you climb on up? Now, I don't know if you've ever climbed a cliff or you've done any rock climbing, but last spring I was with our men and we went on a retreat and we had this climbing wall. And there was probably about, 6 or 7 that decided to do the climbing wall. Probably 4 actually got it and 3 didn't get it. Guess what part of where I was in the 4 and 3. I was a 3. Thank you for the encouragement. I was a 3. I got really close, right? I got really close to the top. And then I just, like, my forearms, it was like they just locked up. It was like, I don't know, I guess it's like lactic acid in my forearms, and I just kicked off the wall. Now, can you imagine when Jonathan climbs a cliff, he gets to the top, he's got to be so, like, tired, and here's what God does. Perhaps God will come to our side. Do you know what God does? He sends the Philistines into a panic. Saul sees this from where he's at in the pomegranate tree. And Jonathan and his armor bearer kill about 20 Philistines, and the rest just flee and scatter. Why? Because he was playing to win. Why? Because he was using some of the gifts that he had inside of him. Why? Because he wasn't afraid. Why? Because he didn't allow his obstacles, he didn't allow his problems, he didn't allow his complaint to stop him from making a difference. Imagine what it would look like when we were part of doing the same thing. I love Pathways. I love that our church is committed to Jesus Christ. But I want to challenge you today. My goal is very simple. If you're not serving, if you're not engaged here at Pathways, I want you to experience the joy and the pleasure of serving, to see it as a privilege. The God of all gods, the one true God, placed you to be a part of a church, to share his love with other people who are a part of the body and not a part of the body. What a privilege. Can we do that outside the walls of the church? Of course we can. Should we do that everywhere? Of course we should. But not at the exclusion of doing it here with our family, our church family, our faith community. Why? Because when other people see that, there's something distinctive about servanthood. There's something that sets us apart in the hearts and the minds of people. See that we're different. And we're not trying to blend in. We're trying to step up. That's what I want. I want you to be a part of that community. Would you stand as we close with a word of prayer? And as you go this week, I want to challenge you to do a couple things. If you don't know your spiritual gifts, I want you to get online, pathwayschurch.us, and I want you to take a spiritual gifts test. That's the first thing I want you to do. The second thing, I want you to talk to somebody. I want you to call the church. I want you to send an email, talk to a staffer. If you see a volunteer around here and you're like, man, I could help. I could do that. Why not engage? Why not talk to somebody? Hey, I want to help. I want to serve. Are you going to have to change some things? You might have to. You're going to have to give a little bit more. You will, but you'll get some more. You'll be a part of something bigger than yourself. Bow with me as we close. Father, thanks. Jesus, we know some of this material. God, we know inside of us, we know as human beings, because you created us, that when we serve, there's an experience there that just is so beyond our selfishness, where we really experience who you are. God, and I thank you for this story, God, where you just put before us this idea of playing to win and watching Jonathan's example. I pray today, God, that you would just grow us as believers, as followers of you. God, I pray, Lord, that we would hear your voice, that we would do exactly what you ask us to do, and we would do it for your glory. We just thank you. We ask this in the matchless name of Jesus. And everyone who agreed with this prayer said, amen.